Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
We're doing a different kind of a Thursday dialogue today, which is what we do whenever we've got some breaking news. And of course, today we're focusing on this devastating situation in the Eastern Cape, the devastating floods that have claimed, I think so far, 49 lives. The Premier of the Eastern Cape, Oscar Mabuyane, has described this as one of the most painful tragedies to hit the province in recent years. And it's just been so devastating. Emergency response teams have been dispatched to various areas, and they're working around the clock to provide critical support to communities that have been impacted. My understanding is that schools have also been affected. Around 6,000 learners have been impacted by the devastating storm. There are about 58 or so schools that have been damaged as well. So what we'll do this hour is speak to the different stakeholders. We're going to start now with the Premier of the Eastern Cape. I'll bring in the other ministers as well. We've got a reporter on the ground as well who will chat to us. So let's welcome Oscar Mabuyane, who is the Premier of the Eastern Cape first. Premier, thank you for making time. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Clement. Thanks to you, and good morning to your listeners. Thank you so much.
What is the extent of the flood damage in the province, and particularly in Mthatha?
It's horrific. It's horrific, Clement. Things that I've seen there yesterday is terrible. We still hard at work with our rescue teams. We've got about 5 rescue teams on the ground. The SABS teams, also the health rescue teams that are working from an aerial point of view. Also, we've got aquatic team and those that are terrestrial. So it's not an easy situation. At least now, water is subsided. It's easy to move across. It's a question of working on a mud situation. It's so bad. It's something that we've never seen. We've never experienced. I've heard in the Bible about something called Nogumbe. I suspect it was Nogumbe that visited our people there. And unfortunately, it happened in the very difficult hours, very early hours of the morning on that day. Kind of people caught off guard. Yes, there were warnings from South African weather services, but no one would have actually imagined or anticipate what has happened there. Yes, we are a disaster-prone province. We've seen the issues, challenges of global warming and climate change, and we never ever thought we can experience such levels of floods during winter. We're always preparing ourselves in winter for snow this side, but with that kind of rain that actually fell on that part, it's something that indeed it makes all of us to understand that the global warming is inevitable. It is here.
Yeah. How many people have died so far? The last I checked, that number was at 49. And are there still others that are still missing? Do we know the number of those missing, if they are?
Because of the magnitude of what has happened there, yes, you are right. As of yesterday, we were counting up to 49, and I'm happy also to announce that we have also concluded the autopsies or the postmortems of those 49 bodies. Our health team has been working late yesterday and started the early hours of this morning at 4. They've concluded now. Families are there for viewing, and we have also arranged the psychosocial support services, the post-viewing handling. Our teams are there to make sure that we're taking care of families. Once again, we would want to take the opportunity to convey our heartfelt condolences to all the families, schools, and kids that surely are also attending, are also getting the counseling services as well with this kind of a traumatic situation of their colleagues, if I may put it like that. So when we are expecting more, as the rescue teams are actually unraveling some bodies. At least for now, we can still account for 49. There are also other homes that have collapsed, so we need to remove those rubble in order to see what's going on underneath those rubble. So far, we are just rolling up our sleeves, all hands on the deck, to assist all what we can, but also communities have been all out and supporting. They are able also to identify each other. Is there any person missing? So we are also working with that kind of an intelligence. We're deploying all our services, the artificial intelligence, drones, and everybody that any kind of intervention we can have. They are all on the ground now to assist, also to be able to consolidate a report for assessment, to understand how many homes that have been damaged, so that as we package sort of intervention as government, we are able to be more agile and we don't rely on the manual. The area is a bit stretchy, it's a bit longer, where the stream was moving. So it's not an easy situation of walking distance that you can walk across and do ABCD easily. So we are basically getting everything that we have and support that we are so receiving is quite amazing as well.
Okay, so how do we get ready for something similar like this, where we get these devastating floods? Premier, you've indicated that this is a disaster-prone province, but when you look at the resources that are required, it looks like there's a critical shortage of those resources, and that can compromise then the emergency response capabilities. Has the province always had capacitated emergency response?
Not really. We do have systems in place and capacity to a certain extent, but as of yesterday, or a day before yesterday, I've realized as a premier that the sort of silo mentality that the government to people like it doesn't help. I think we are one government, we are a unitary government. We might be having national, provincial, and local, but we are one government. We should start internalizing that we must build a system and institutionalize them. We don't build system around individuals, because when those individuals are not there, systems collapse. So we've got to institutionalize system, but also we've got to appreciate nationally that Eastern Cape and KZN are really a threat, are really disaster-prone provinces. And now it's no longer a question of summer or so, including the Western Cape. Almost all the coastal provinces are really disaster-prone provinces are exposed to this. The capacity government needs to prepare itself to the tape, because it's clear now that we must anticipate this and also have a robust kind of social facilitation or awareness programs for our people. When people are watching news on TV, they must know that you don't just watch news and when it's going to be a turn of the weather services, you stand up and do something else, because no one has ever bothered about looking at that much on weather, especially here in our areas. So it's important now that we run a proper campaign to sensitize our people, but also the challenge of our people who sometimes, in rural areas, you get a plot simply because you have gone to a traditional leader and no proper rezoning is done, environmental assessment is done, etc. When the municipality comes to say, but no, you are building or constructing below a flood line, you can't do this. And someone says, I've been here for more than 50 years or 60, I've never seen what you're talking about. So it's that kind of attitude that needed to be changed, so that our people are able to realize that we are living in a total different world, in a total different planet Earth. Things are changing and they are quite dangerous to our people. It's not a question of refusing the access to land parcel. It's a question of being cautious to protect the lives of people, so that experiences like these are not experienced again. But I think it's a learning curve. We're learning on all these challenges as we go. But it's important that we improve. We've got a solid integrated plan, which has got nothing to do about municipality. It's not a blame game issue now. Whether it's municipality, this or that, it's us as government, and as government, we should be having a clear, solid, integrated plan to actually prevent the disastrous effects of this. We will not continue having or experiencing this kind of repercussions out of disasters if we are able to be quite much more proactive.
Yeah, and just lastly, what about the state of infrastructure? I mean, could the state of infrastructure also be the reason for the extent of this devastation? Because we are going to experience more extreme weather events to come, and the rebuilding process, the rebuilding of that infrastructure needs to be resilient to such climate risks. So future constructions must have extreme weather events in mind. What's your plan around that?
As I say that we need to do more in terms of sensitizing, especially the people in peri-urban and in rural areas. Remember, it's only in the urban areas where everything is regulated. Even how you build a house, you must get an approval from the municipality. What material are you using? Is the environmental situation allowing that you can do something like that? In rural areas, you just get a piece of land from a traditional leader, you build your house the way that you want. So I mean things like those. The infrastructure issue, it will forever be a challenge in the rural environment. Yes, we are working hard on that. That's why we have got a problem of the road maintenance, because with this problem of climate change, with all this inclement weather that we are actually witnessing, you build a road, rural access road this year early. By December, when the rainfall season comes with floods, the whole road that you built is wiped out. That's a question of us now working on alternative technologies. What kind of material must we be using in order to construct an access road, bridges, etc.? The bridge that has been wiped out with kids, it is on R61. It's a national road. It's a road that is now under Sandral. It's a road that is being worked from Beaufort West up into Bizana, a solid infrastructure that is being worked on. Yes, in that particular stretch, Clement, it's also very much unfortunate. We have been sitting with designs and plans over the last 10 years. The road that connects from Tata Airport to Tata City, that road should have been dualed now. That is almost 4 lanes. Going the direction, 2 lanes, the other direction, 2 lanes. But we can't move because people in that area, they were never properly settled there as a human settlement arrangement. They settled themselves. They've built closer to the road, on top of the road. So Sandral can't move, even with those plans. They've been having budget to deal with that issue. So these are issues that we've got to strengthen our bylaws as municipalities. At least the no becomes no. I know when municipalities are acting against residents and people react as if government has got no sympathy, has got no heartless government and all that. Sometimes we must act firmly to protect things like this.
Premier Oscar Mabuyane, thank you so much for making time. He is the Premier of the Eastern Cape Province, talking to us about this devastation that's befallen that province. 49 people, as you heard from him. They're expecting more people to be found. There are some that are still missing. But I really want us to also focus our attention on the issue of infrastructure. And maybe you've got some ideas. Maybe you are from the Eastern Cape, or you have been to the Eastern Cape and you've seen the kind of infrastructure there. I mean, I remember even with the floods in KwaZulu-Natal. Remember the floods in KZN when we lost about, 435 or so people? There were over 6,000 people that became homeless. They were displaced. There were 54 missing at the time. The cost to rebuild that infrastructure ran into billions. And the conversation that we had on the show, even with experts, was how do we get our infrastructure to be fit to withstand disasters like this? Because when you look at bridges, when you look at some of the roads, some of the drainage systems, and it's more devastating in rural areas. Can you imagine how worse it probably is in a province like the Eastern Cape? It's 21 minutes after 11.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
24 minutes after 11 o'clock. The Thursday Dialogue today is focusing on the devastation in the Eastern Cape. There are over 50 people now, we're told, that have died. I see on my screens here the death toll has now risen to 57 in the Eastern Cape from the floods that were experienced since Monday. Our reporter Mongezi Koko has been on the ground this week, chatting particularly to some of the families that have been affected. Mongezi, thank you for also coming through to chat to us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. Thank you so much for having me.
What have you observed the minute you arrived there? From your vantage point, how devastating is the situation there?
Look, Clement, upon arrival, we arrived on Tuesday, is when we went straight in with search and rescue teams who conducted an operation around the Kukriha River, which spans on Mthatha West. And this is where we saw the search and rescue operators being joined by families. And we managed to speak to two mothers who were looking for their children. Now, you will remember that of those children who went missing, there was a 22 scholar transport vehicle which veered off. It was swept away by some water on that bridge on the R61. And unfortunately, Clement, for the family members, they did go through the very tedious process of having to identify their children on the ground and having seen the divers pull out their children. So it was really a tragic scene, one filled with devastation. Now, Clement, as the day progressed, particularly yesterday, is when we saw the emergency service personnel driving out, or rather coming out with around about a body at an hour. So it was moving at such a fast and sad pace that you saw people crying, you saw people trying to manage the terrain, which has been also affected by the flooding and the inclement weather, where we saw a lot of mud and people tripping, a lot of people crying. It was really just a tragic sight to see. Now, Clement, I also want to touch on some of the measures that have been put in place. So most of the people who have been displaced, I mean, the figure that we received yesterday from the Eastern Cape Provincial Department, or rather provincial government, was that there was over 500 families displaced, and we'd see them in halls, in schools, and in municipal buildings. And this is where we got the opportunity to chat to them. And really what is being said is that it happened so quickly. Albeit the flooding began on Tuesday in the morning, the real ramification and issues then came about yesterday, where people realized that their loved ones were missing, where they realized that their homes had been completely destroyed. They'd lost all sort of documents. So it was a situation where they say that rebuilding is going to prove more difficult than anything else. And I mean, the mother who eventually found her son, I think she began the search at 5 a.m. and they came across her son at around about 4 p.m., a 14-year-old. What she says is that the family had already accepted that the child may have been deceased. The only issue that they had was that they wanted to find the son, be able to go through a process of burying their child. So it was really, really a sad scene. And I'm just going to close off with this one, where a young mother who had recently bought a plot of land in this area, just alongside the Kukriha River, she says that she has a 2-year-old and had to carry the child on her back, had to dive into the water, try and find her key, try and unlock her butler and get out and swim out. So it's a lot of issues. The family that we also spoke to had to break their roof, sit on top and pull each other out and just try and wait it out because of how intense the water was flowing.
Sure. Yeah. It's really just heartbreaking, Mongezi, hearing you just even describe how sad the situation is there. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Mongezi Koko is our reporter with Eyewitness News. He's on the ground in the Eastern Cape, reporting for us the latest from these floods that have cost now claimed 57 lives, and we are told more people are expected to be announced dead, because there are many that are still missing. Lubabalo, you're calling us from Guguletu. What are your thoughts? Good morning.
Hi, Clement. I'm going to be straight to the point.
Yeah.
Clement, Oscar has been the premier of the Eastern Cape for about 7 years now. And before that, he's occupied provincial legislation's role. He's always been a senior in the Eastern Cape. Now, I have to say this, with Oscar as the premier of the Eastern Cape, that province will never see its full potential. We just listened to him now talking to you, Clement, and then one thing I took out was that he did not provide no solutions for now, and he has no solutions for the future. Now, in the Eastern Cape, there's vast amounts of land throughout the Eastern Cape. The reason why people build and live closer to town in those shallow areas is because of the lack of infrastructure in the whole province. You know, for example, Clement, I'll give you this. When my mother-in-law is not well, she lives in Gua, in Butterworth. We bring her to Cape Town for about 2 weeks to 3 weeks. By the time she leaves Cape Town, she's 100%. And people are always amazed when she goes back feeling much better. So you see, the infrastructure issues in the Eastern Cape are causing people to live in those places which is closer to town. You know, and Oscar saying that he's blaming global warming. I mean, this guy is, you know, it's ridiculous that we have a leader who has no solutions for the issues that happen year after year. And it's across the board, Clement. It's across the board.
Yeah, Lubabalo, I feel your frustration. And I think you're raising important things. The reason we're seeing the extent of this devastation is not just because of climate change. Oscar Mabuyane himself says this is a disaster-prone province. So if it is, then what measures have been put in place to ensure that should a disaster strike, then there are processes in place. We've got functioning emergency response teams, right? How have they improved disaster management, their disaster management strategies? Have they prioritized proper drainage infrastructure? Have they refurbished the bridges? So you're right. There's a lot to hold these leaders accountable for. And it's just so devastating that these things happen. And then that's when they wake up to the reality that we can't just talk about disaster prone provinces and how bad things are. We need to plan for them and invest money in ensuring that these provinces are able to withstand these disasters. It's 11:32.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
20 minutes before 12 on our Thursday Dialogue this morning, we are looking at this devastation in the Eastern Cape, the floods that have claimed now the lives of 57 people now. The death toll in the Eastern Cape has risen to 57. And as you heard the Premier earlier speak to us, they're expecting more. I'm asking, how do we avoid this kind of extent of the devastation? Because disasters are going to strike. People will lose their lives, unfortunately. Some people will go missing. But there's something we can do. Government can do something to prepare for the worst, especially when you know your area, your province is disaster prone. I'm taking your calls on 011-883-0702. Mli Mandlela Mdamase is calling us from Johannesburg. Mli, how are you doing?
Good morning, Clement. I'm well, thank you. And I trust you are well too.
Sure.
You know, Clement, I come from that area. I'm born and bred and have lived in that area for the longest time. And I fully agree with you. The Premier may be correct to say we are a disaster-prone province, but I think it's also important to note that disasters are not the same. So different areas are prone to different disasters. And I think we must empathize with the Premier and the province, because this particular disaster that confronts them now, which is a flood, is a disaster that has not occurred, in the last 30 years or plus that I've at least been alive and of sober and thinking mind. I can never recall this kind of disaster occurring in that area. So it would tell you that it is not a disaster, even with warnings, that I think a municipality or the disaster management agencies would have been able to plan adequately for. So on the one end, and I think the important point I just wanted to make, Clement, is that I think there's a greater social dialogue and social cooperation that we need to build between the state and communities. Those areas that are affected, if one looks closely at them, are areas which mushroomed as a result of land invasions, where there was an absence of proper, adequate and compliance with laws that apply to those kind of buildings. But secondly, the absence of the state and its inefficiency in enforcing the law to prevent people from building in those areas. And unfortunately, when government intervenes at times and it wants to demolish houses which have been built illegally on land that is not suitable for this kind of development, it is again society which comes up strongly and labels government as insensitive.
Yeah.
And when disasters as this struck and people lose their lives and their belongings, again government is blamed for not being able to plan adequately or to cater for these kind of disasters. And I think there's a conversation we must have, because I do not believe this is the last. And for as long as we're unable to control and plan our towns properly, control and enforce our bylaws, direct people to adequate and safe areas where they should build, we will continue to have a recurrence of these kind of occurrences. And until we can have that social cooperation and dialogue and engagement that takes us forward, perhaps that is when we'll be able to resolve and preserve life for our people. But for what has happened in Umtata, I can safely tell you, I do not anticipate, even if I was Premier tomorrow, which would never happen, it is not a disaster that I think we could have adequately planned for, based on what the experience in that area has been in terms of disasters of this nature.
Yeah, and if recent history is anything to go by, we are going to experience more and more extreme weather events like this that will be devastating. So the sooner these governments really take seriously just the necessary planning processes, the better. Mlimadela, thank you so much for speaking to us and for bringing in also that experience as someone who comes from the Eastern Cape and knows those areas that have been so affected. It's 14 minutes now before 12.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
Let's bring in now Professor Hangwelani Makidimisha Chipungu, who is a professor in the Department of Town and Regional Planning at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Prof, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Clement, and to all your listeners.
So we've been talking about how we need to prepare for more extreme weather events like these ones. And yes, as Mlimandlela, the call we took now, you wonder sometimes if it's even possible to plan for some of these disasters that strike. But I think we can plan to at least minimize the extent of the devastation. So I want us to start off maybe with, what are some of the circumstances that that allows for floods to be so devastating? What's not being done right?
Thank you so much, Clement, for your question. It's quite clear that issues around climate change are here to stay, and we have seen in KZN, we have seen now in Eastern Cape, and even in more parts of the country, we're still going to experience the same. But we may not be able to prevent the weather itself, but we may be able to prevent the impact of the extreme weather events that we have. And I think that's what we need to put our effort on. And I don't think as a country, irrespective of which province in this country, there's a province which will come forward confidently. They say that we are ready to bring any kind of disaster, we know what to do. And I think we're not investing resources enough on the preventative measures of to make sure that when disaster finds us, at least let's be ready. Let's not lose many lives. Let's make sure that it will save people's lives. That is not what is happening.
Yeah.
But what we've become more of a reactionary state.
Yeah.
And always getting very confused. What do we do? Who do we talk to? But by now we should at least know that this is the problem. If you look at the area in the Western Cape, in the Eastern Cape that we are talking about, the area is experiencing what I call pirate urbanization, where I think the previous caller mentioned where people, they're just building everywhere. But that is the role of a planner. And we have something what we call development control. Why do you allow that to happen if you know there's an issue? That's why we have regulations which speaks to those issues. So we need to enforce our bylaws. But also, if you look at the area that we're talking about, Ecolini to be specific, they call it Decolini, yeah. I hope I'm saying correctly. If you look at it, you will see that it's relatively flat, right? Now, it's from an urban design perspective, planning drainage system for an area like that is very expensive. One would think because it's flat it's easy, but it's not easy because you want drainage to be in a certain slope. So we're looking at a slope of about 100 gradient. So it become very difficult to plan. And the river is not very far, and the bridge was not high enough. Then how do you then allow people to stay in an environment like that? So we have to enforce our bylaw. And it's correct that it's very difficult perhaps to think about these issues when nothing is happening. But the approach that we should take as a country now is that we are at the space where every piece of land, every region, rural, urban, needs to be planned for. But we need to have what we call rural planning, where we are risk-informed in our planning, in our urban design, in our planning. And that's not what's happening. People are allocating land willingly and staying everywhere, and that is really a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about bridges that some of which are not high enough, and you wonder, because sometimes these tenders go out and people are not efficient enough to be building that kind of infrastructure, and that's when you've got consequences like this, where your bridges were just not fit for even the particular areas where they were installed. What do we, in terms of investment, Prof, what is your advice to government? Because I find that that's what we're going to talk about now, and it's happened before, even with KwaZulu-Natal and other places. We always, as you say, reactionary. And then when disaster strikes, and there are so many people who lose their lives, who get displaced, and then government takes seriously the necessary efforts that it should have taken to avoid the extent of the devastation. But then 2 years later, you see that there's still no investment in proper drainage infrastructure, in building proper bridges, especially in these areas that are prone to disasters. So how serious is it that government needs to start putting the money where their mouth is? Because that infrastructure needs to be upgraded. You need to build it. That's going to take investment, but more so intention.
Yeah. You know, you're raising a very important issue, Clement, because whether we like it or not, if we don't do anything, we are almost certain that we are still going to lose more lives in South Africa, across the country. And it's not just Eastern Cape, it's everywhere in South Africa. We are just not ready. We are unready state as it relates to climate or extreme weather events. So how serious is this? This is serious. Even agent, we should have been doing this as in like yesterday. We need to start investing on the drainage system that work. We need to start to do things like river channelization. If you look at the river there in Dikolini, it's a very shallow, up to on the surface river. If you look at that river, even in a big map, you may even miss it because it's that small. At the bottom line, this tells us that every piece of land needs to be planned for. And we need to start working on our drainage system. And the drainage system that we need to work with, it has to be at 3 levels, or if not 2 levels. One, we are looking at collecting of water from roads, obviously, to make sure that you dispose it into the drainage system. But also the part we don't talk about a lot, and this is where the community comes in, and I think the pre-affairs scholar, when talking about the collaboration with communities, this is where community comes in. Our people, our communities need to be taught. If you are having building a house, you cannot have a house which does not have a gutter and where you don't channel the water. If you leave your house like that, where do you think that water is going? That's the first thing, because that has a negative impact into our environment. So you leave your water like that, there's no drainage system, it's an issue. The other issue is, of course, what I've mentioned in terms of what the government needs to do. But the people themselves, how they relate with their space. You see, it's very fashionable in some quarters within the country where you have to pave everywhere in your house. You don't want to see grass. You don't want to see any permeable surfaces. That has a contribution. It's contributed towards the speed and the gravity at which water will move from your house to the next one. And imagine if you have hundreds. I understand there are about 300 households or so, I think. You have 300 households who paved the house where every water gets into their stand is rushing to where exactly? You have no drainage system. Your gravity of the slope is sitting at about 100. You are in trouble already. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of education needed to the communities as well. Absolutely.
Professor Hangweni Makitimisha Chipungu, thank you for speaking to us. He's a professor in the Department of Town and Regional Planning at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
5 minutes before 12 o'clock, we're wrapping up our discussion about the devastation in the Eastern Cape with the Minister of Basic Education, Sivuyo Kwagube, who's joining us on the line. Minister, thanks for your time. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to your listeners.
So how affected are the schools there? The last I saw, the 6,000 learners had been impacted. There were about 58 schools that have been damaged. From your assessment so far, how bad is it?
Look, I think firstly, Clement, this community is reeling from the tragedy and the loss here. About 57 people have been confirmed as deceased. We know that there are 6 children from the bus accident that took place that have been declared as deceased. 4 are still missing, and I've received, as of this morning, a confirmation of a further 2 learners in different areas of this district that have also been deceased. I've just been to visit the parents of the children who are either missing or have been confirmed as having died. And I just think the human devastation alone is it's heartbreaking. And we're going to do everything in our power to support these families, to support the burial of these children. And of course, we're not going to give up until we find these learners. In terms of the infrastructure damage, I am joining Minister of Kokta now at 1 o'clock for a briefing on the JOC. And once they give us a sense of the declaration or the classification of the disaster, it then gives us an indication of how much resources are we able to access from a disaster management point of view. And it is through those funds that we'll be able to quickly move with pace to go and at least repair some of the schools so that things like June exams can start to take place. Because, of course, as you know, the school calendar is tightly managed and we don't want any children falling behind much more than they should.
And then any contingency measures as of, let's say, next week? What are you looking at so that because there are some kids as well that we're relying on, I think, scholar transport. There are areas that are, the infrastructure is damaged, so accessibility is an issue. What are you looking at in terms of contingency measures?
Look, the disaster management teams are saying that they are quite, firstly, they are relieved that the weather has improved. So it stopped raining, so they're able to quickly clear the rubble and the pathways. This particular thing, I think less about the damaging of the roads. I mean, this incident took place because the driver completely estimated the power of the water on that bridge and just how deep it was. And so the bridge in itself wasn't broken, but I think so from human error, he entered the bridge, and then that, of course, then swept away the car. So we are able to then reallocate learners in surrounding schools, those whose schools have been severely damaged. But in the Mthatha region alone, we're looking at about 7 schools. Some of them are not completely devastated, so we're able to move operations. But of course, our main priority is to make sure that our matric learners are able to write these exams at the end of June, postponed some of the exams towards the end of the month. And DBE is staying with all of those.
All right. Sivuyo Kwagube, thank you for making time. She's the Minister of Basic Education.